Okay, so the question is, using an in-place upgrade to Windows 10 21H2 using a sequence, is it a good idea to also add drivers during the process or to separate it? Uh, it's a great question, but it's one of those it depends question. Because when working with, so let me open up my favorite tool here, WordPad. Still can start it as write.exe for those of you that might remember the old Windows version. So the scenario is in-place upgrade. I cannot spell today either. Using task sequences to Windows 10 21H2. And in this case, we are assuming that you're coming from a Windows 10 1909, so that you don't, so you can, basically you cannot use an enablement package, which would have been an easy option. So, so from Windows 10 1909 to 21H2. So this is a full in-place upgrade. This is a setup exit-driven process, and the question was about drivers. Your machine will fall into one of four different states in terms of drivers. And in some scenarios, when you're doing this, from a driver's point of view, you may run into that you don't have to do anything at all. And that basically means that whatever was on the box from the beginning will work just fine on the new version of Windows 10. It's rare, but it happens. All right. There are some scenarios where you may have to do update of drivers prior to starting setup.exe. And in this case, it is the sequence that starts setup.exe. And it could be if you're using certain security features like core isolation in Windows 10, for example, that will evaluate drivers before it starts. And if they're not matching what they're supposed to be, it actually breaks the upgrade. And then that can be that you have to update drivers during the upgrade, because you can feed driver packages to the upgrade process. That's a variable that you can set that makes setup actually use those drivers. And the final scenario could be that you may need to remove the drivers prior to starting setup. And this could be the case if you have a vendor that once supported Windows 10 on a model, but they no longer support it. And now Microsoft typically steps in and provides an inbox driver for that for those devices. But for Windows to pick an inbox driver over an older third-party vendor driver, you often have to get rid of that driver. So you usually use PnP-util to delete those drivers so that you can force setup to pick up PnP-util to get rid of that driver. So I do recommend looking into modern driver management. They make it very, very easy to update drivers. And this is something you can even do way before you do an upgrade. Here I have a sequence. The only thing this sequence does is update drivers. It's a single script that simple you deploy, and it will update drivers when there are new drivers available. And it is looking for those drivers in the various ConfigMgr packages that you have created. In this case, a bunch of Dell packages that I had. So that's an elegant solution. The same solution does support also to provide them to the setup. A different switch, but the same script can be used. So yeah, good stuff. Challenge I put this is that you typically cannot go to a vendor website and tell the vendor, okay, I have these three models here. I'm about to go from Windows 10 this to Windows 10 that. What do I need to do? They don't simply have that matrix of information. So it's usually up to you guys to test your various models to figure out, okay, for this model, what do I need to do? Okay, you were lucky, you don't have to do anything. Okay, these four models, okay, you actually have to provide drivers to them for them to work reliably. And this is not just for sequences. This is something you may have to do also when doing servicing using service plans. It's one of those, it depends on the hardware. And to add some complexity to that, these days it can also involve BIOS updates and TPM management, where you need to be on a certain BIOS version for a certain version of Windows to actually function. And in the Windows 11 case, it also now TPM versions. Windows 10 happily accepts the TPM whatever version. Windows 11 is a little bit picky about that. And also here in the United States, recently TSA started to mandate certain companies that are responsible for infrastructure in the country to do update of drivers and update of BIOS, update of TPM chips more frequently. Otherwise, they'll be basically be given a hefty fine for not doing it. But yeah, a long ramble to a short question, but this is what you have to deal with for any type of servicing. For scenarios where you don't have to do an in-place upgrade, where you need to go from, say, Windows 10 28.1 up to, whoops, I did not mean to type that, up to this, you don't have to run setup. This is just a traditional EKB, as they're being called, but an enablement package. And typically you don't have to worry about BIOS or drivers when going from this to this, because it's essentially the same version of Windows. You're just enabling different features that have been coming down through software updates earlier. So this takes like 2 minutes, reboot done. Whereas a full, as I like to call them, in-place upgrade that is driven by setup, that will take you an hour and a half, or up to an hour and a half.